Hey guys, thought I'd do a quick video for you today on water purification and some of the contaminants you can come up against and some ways to take care of that. First, I want to start by saying I'm definitely no expert. You should always do your own homework, check with the CDC and possibly some of your local resources. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so there are four main ways water can be contaminated: chemical, bacterial, protozoan, and viral. Let's go ahead and take a look at those. Chemical can be anything that you don't want in the water, obviously. Petroleum, distillates, gasoline, antifreeze, things that you would usually find in a waterway because of boats and whatnot, so that's something you definitely have to take into consideration. You can also filter that, but it's best to do a combination of boiling and filtering. We'll talk about that in a bit. Protozoan are going to be things like cryptosporidium and Giardia, and those are two really nasty intestinal parasites that you don't want. Excuse me. Gives you real bad diarrhea, and that's certainly not something you want out in the woods. Next is going to be bacterial. That's things like Salmonella and E. coli. That can come from a dead animal carcass upriver, or maybe a nearby slaughterhouse, or who knows what. It could be a human body, depending on the situation. Who knows? And that also leads to viral. Things like Hep C and all sorts of other nasty things. So all these things you have to take into consideration when you're attempting to either filter or boil your water. Boiling is always going to be your best choice, so we're going to talk about that next. Here's an important thing a lot of people seem to overlook. A lot of people in a survival or self-reliant situation, not knowing any primitive skills or anything like that, will often think, I'm starving, I need to start setting up traps and, start catching food, and they've totally neglected fire or shelter or perhaps medical, and they're hungry. Well, you don't need food right away. Well, you're going to die without water, though, so you better make sure to attend to that. So almost all the time, again, depending on weather or injuries, water is the number one important, because without that, you're going to be dead before they even find you. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes down to water purification methods, boiling is the only method which has been proven to kill like 99.99% of bacteria, viral. Now, chemical is a different story. Chemical, some of it may evaporate. Petroleum and stuff like that probably won't. So it's going to have to be pre-filtered, which is always a really good idea. And you kind of have to, usually, depending on where you are in the situation, pre-filter your water first and then boil it. And then if you have the means, there's still things left on top, filter it again. But it's always a good idea to do a combination of the both. Even though boiling is almost 100% effective, there's always that chance that one little thing, cryptosporidium cyst is going to get through, and you don't want that. So it's a good idea, if you can, to filter it and boil it. So after checking with the CDC and other websites and authorities on the subject, boiling, having your water come to a rolling boil for 1 minute is good enough to kill everything. They found out that around 165 degrees and past that is when it starts to kill protozoan and bacteria and things like that. And then, it takes another, depending on the heat of the fire, a minute or so to reach a rolling boil, and then you let it boil for a minute after that. So once it's come to a nice big rolling boil, let it go for another minute and a half to be safe. Anything past that, you're really just going to be evaporating your water. I remember back when I was young, the rule was 10 minutes. Well, you're going to waste an awful lot of water if you boil it for 10 minutes, Suppose you already have a limited source, 32 ounces or something like that. It would all be gone in 10 minutes, so you really don't have to do that. Now, again, that's dependent upon altitude. As long as you're at I don't know if it's really considered a regular altitude, I'm below sea level, so. But the rule is, for regular altitudes, rolling boil for 1 minute. Now, anything in higher altitudes, water is different. It takes a shorter time to boil. It boils at a lower boiling point, which means it doesn't have enough time to kill everything. It ends up jumping to 160 degrees real quick and then boiling real soon after that, but it doesn't allow the time length that it needs to kill things. Even at a 1 minute rolling boil, that's not enough because the time has gone by super quick. So in a high altitude situation, they say you should let it come to a rolling boil and then let it boil for about 2 to 3 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And in that environment, your water's not going to evaporate at the same rate either. So that's definitely things to keep in mind. But again, the general rule is rolling boil for 1 minute, minute and a half, and you should be good to go. Okay, now let's talk about chemical purification. There are many different brands and kits that you can buy. Also, you can use a couple of household items, which many of you probably have. One is going to be regular, unscented, and that's important, unscented Clorox bleach. That kills a very large percent of things. However, it does not kill cryptosporidium. or it's very ineffective against it. So again, you would have to filter it and boil it if you did the chlorine. Excuse me, yeah, chlorine. So you got to watch out for that. It does not kill everything. But for chlorine, you're going to want to use 2 to 3 drops per U.S. quart, and you also have to wait a half hour. That's important. You also want to give it a little shake, but definitely wait a half hour, maybe 40 minutes just to be safe. You can also use things like 2% iodine tincture. That's good for cuts, scrapes, and other things like that, but it's also very good for water purification. Again, that also takes about a half hour. Usually, if it's in liquid form, it's 4 to 5 drops per U.S. quart. Excuse me. And that's also a very good thing to use. We use that a bunch in the Everglades. There are a couple other things you can use, like chlorine dioxide tabs and iodine tabs, which you can usually find at a sporting goods store or Army surplus. Those will tell you how many to put in a quart. I believe it's 1, sometimes it's 2. Read the directions on that. And some of them also come in. One brand is usually iodine and then a cleaner. One you use 1 or 2 tabs of iodine, let it sit for a half hour, and then it's got a second bottle that you use to actually clear the water. Because if any of you have ever had iodine, it's pretty nasty tasting, but it's definitely worth having. Alright guys, sorry about this. I seem to be losing light. Here are a couple of things that I use to boil water. First, most main important thing, and your best friend, is a regular stainless steel water bottle. You want to make sure it's not a vacuum bottle, so it's not double walled, because it'll explode. It's a single wall, but you also want to make sure it's nice and strong. Very important. Also, a good real thing is a standard canteen with a nesting cup. That's a lifesaver. Aquamira Frontier Pro water filter. And you can usually find these in the woods, unfortunately, or bring one of your own. You can actually attach it to that and make a dripping filter. That's real good. And then, of course, the 2-part water purification tabs I mentioned. Alright guys, thanks for watching.